Welcome to the Tokunbo Chronicles, a podcast about the journeys we take and the stories we make. In this podcast, I'll be sharing moving stories that are sure to empower, educate, and entertain you. Stories have an incredible way of connecting us to one another, uplifting us, and giving us permission to tell our own story. I will be speaking to entrepreneurs, trailblazers, and dreamers who have incredible and powerful stories to share. From their triumphs and tribulations, we'll be drawing out the details, the how-tos, and the lessons we can take away. Life is what you make it, and only you get to decide how your story is written. I hope by sharing these stories with you, you will live inspired and equipped to live yours out unapologetically. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the chronicles. I am your host and chief storyteller, Tokunbo Koiki, a multi-passionate entrepreneur, founder of the award-winning Tokunbo's Kitchen and London African Food Week. When I'm not cooking up a storm in the kitchen or regaling guests with my own epic stories, you are most likely to find me in the middle of the dance floor, bringing the party to life. Hi everyone, welcome to the Tokunbo Chronicles. Who is Tokunbo? Well, Tokunbo is a chef, an entrepreneur, a mom, a fashion stylist, ex-social worker, facilitator. You could say I have been, and I am, and I will be lots of different things. And the reason why I wanted to start this show, this podcast, is really to share stories. Not just my stories, but also stories of other inspiring entrepreneurs and individuals that I have encountered throughout my life, especially in the last 5 years of me running my own business full time. I truly believe that I am an accidental entrepreneur. I was never that child that grew up thinking about, wanting to run my own business or thinking about entrepreneurship as something that I wanted to do. But I grew up with a mom who is a businesswoman. And that's when I kind of got into entrepreneurship, because when I was 14, my mom was not able to leave the country here in London where we live because of her immigration status. So she actually used to send me to the US, particularly to New York, to do shopping for her. And so from that experience, even growing up, when I then became a professional, I went to university, got my degree in psychology, and then went back and did a master's in social work, because as a child, that was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a social worker. I had this thing I always loved children. So I always knew that I wanted to, actually wanted to be an education psychologist first. So I worked in education for a few years, realized that path wasn't actually going to be for me. So then I went back and did social work. And so growing up, even whilst I was working, I always had a side hustle. I was always, buying accessories, buying clothing and buying shoes and bags and selling whether it was selling it online on eBay or selling it, in Nigeria, going to pop-up stores and actually having my own store where I was selling things like that. But, it wasn't something that I saw as a full-time thing. It was just something that I knew that I love doing. I love shopping. So for me, the opportunity to actually be able to go shopping and actually make money from that was like a win-win. So actually in August 2014, So I actually started my master's in social work in 2008. And when I finished in 2010, I already knew, I started my master's in 2007. And at that time, I already knew that I did not want to be a social worker anymore. But because it was like a lifelong dream that I'd had since I was about 15, where I actually wrote an essay that I talked about wanting to become a social worker, wanting to live in America. And so for me, at that time, I felt that I still needed to kind of pursue this dream, even though there was a part of me that I knew that this was no longer the dream, that this was no longer the path that I wanted to take for myself. But yeah, so I still went ahead and I did the master's, and thankfully, the government was paying for it, and, I got a bursary. So it wasn't and I think that was also part of the reason why I also decided to do the master's. But the whole 2 years of me doing my master's, I actually used to tell my lecturers and tell everyone that I did not have any intentions of being like practicing social work. And yeah, so, over the last few years, especially the last decade of my life, I've learned how powerful the tongue is, and whatever you say you are is essentially what you become. And whatever you say and whatever stories you tell yourself about who you are or who you think you are, that is the story that you are going to continue to have, unless you make a conscious decision to change that narrative or change that story. So me kind of like saying I didn't want to be a social worker essentially set me on the path that led me to where I am today, which is after about 5 years of working in social care, moved to Nigeria, did some social work over there, moved to America, I did social work over there, came back to England, I did social work, and I realized that even though I was within doing social work, I was doing lots of different things. So I was working in mental health, I was working in youth offending, I worked with young people, I worked with older people, I worked with, severely mentally ill clients. I worked with, the homeless population in Washington, D.C. And during all the different roles that I was doing within social work, I still I felt like I was limited in my capacity to actually be of value and of service. The social work that I imagined growing up was not the social work that I found. And this is even before all the current crises in terms of, social work cuts and things like that. So in August 2014, I made a decision to resign from work. And at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that doing social work was not the thing that I wanted to do anymore at that point. And at that point was when I actually also started to really consider, starting my own business and really making a go of it. So rather than having it as a side also, but actually doing it as a full-time thing. And, also as a young mom at the time, I didn't want a job that was taking me away from my daughter. I actually wanted the flexibility to be able to pick my daughter and take my daughter to school, pick her up from school, and be very active in her life, especially as a single mom. So for about a year, after I resigned, I went on a self-reflection journey, trying to figure out who I was and what areas I could possibly start a business in. And during this time, I was developing a relationship with a mentor. And one of the things that I discovered from that relationship was there were three things that kind of shaped who I am, and the three things that kind of brought me joy, and the three areas of my life where I felt that I could actually maybe possibly either find a work or start a business. And those three things were food, fashion, and fostering. Fostering, why? When I was in school, so the first time I heard about the term fostering, I think I must have been about 12, and I was in school. And I remember one of my best friends telling me her aunt or her stepmom, I think her grandmother was a foster carer. And when I heard about foster carer and fostering, I just thought, oh my God, this makes sense, because in Nigeria, in West Africa, this is something that we do informally anyways. And I just love the idea of, being able to take in children who, for whatever reason, do not have the luxury of growing up in a home where they wanted, and being able to provide a space for them. And ultimately, that also shaped my decision into why I decided to go into social work. So fostering and, mental health and that all spare of social work is a big part of who I am. But at that time, it's also, it wasn't bringing me joy. I was no longer feeling fulfilled with the role that I was doing. Fashion, like I said, I started buying and selling fashion wear from when I was 15. I love shopping. If there's one thing I can do and I can do for free and I love doing, is actually shopping. And I'm not talking about online shopping. I'm talking about actually going into a shop, trying things on, finding things. And again, over the years, because people always kind of commented on how well I dress and my personal style. So I used to actually do personal shopping for family and friends. And sometimes even, acquaintances would ask me for either for me to go shopping with them or for me to do some shopping for them. So in 2015, I decided to start working on a personal shopper business. I started doing my market research, send a message to all my family and friends to like tell them about, this is my business plan and this is what I'm intending on doing. And then next thing I knew, I started a food business. And it kind of like, so I guess you could say I'm an accidental chef. Food has always been a big part of who I am. Like I said, I was born here in London, but my mom took me to Nigeria as a baby. So I lived in Nigeria for the first 9 years of my life. And after that, came back to London. And I actually really struggled to acclimatize and eat British food because my taste bud was so used to Nigerian food, which to me is really one of the best cuisines that you can find in the world, Nigerian West African food. And that is a hill I am perfectly happy to die on. And also growing up, I remember my mom literally forcing me into the kitchen when I was 12 and her telling me, she started cooking for her family when she was 8 years old, so I was already 4 years behind. So for me, growing up, food and cooking was a chore. It was something that I had to do. It was not something I particularly enjoyed doing. Fast forward to many, many years later, I was now living in Washington, D.C. And during that time, food became a big, big part of my life. It was the way that I made connection to people. I remember some of my early experiences in Washington revolved around food. One of my best friends now, I met her and, at a networking event, and she invited me back to her place for the Super Bowl weekend. And then the following weekend, it was the African Cups of Nations. So we went to a Ghanaian restaurant and I had this amazing time. So, a lot of things that I did in DC revolved around food. And also it was the way that I made connections to people. It was the way that I made new friends. Brunch, the first time I heard about brunch was when I lived in DC, and it was just such a highlight of my time out there. But also, I actually had a light bulb moment where one day a friend popped over and he was feeling hungry. So he asked for some food. And at the time, I didn't really have anything in the house, but I had some plantain and I had some eggs. So that's why I cooked for him. I fried him some plantain and I fried him my special eggs. And I guess you could say the reason my eggs are special is because I tend to put lots of different things in my eggs, like prawns or corned beef. And I never forget like sitting down watching this man devour the meal that I just prepared and just feeling so happy as he was eating. And like I said, I literally had a light bulb moment because in that moment I realized that my food could bring joy to other people and actually make other people happy. And the other thing that kind of like really made kind of like the seeds I planted that then grew into Tokunbo's Kitchen also started in DC because when I was in DC, I used to see a lot of food trucks on my way to work every morning, selling food from all over the world. And they would go away and then they would come back and do the same for the lunchtime crowd. And for me, I just used to think, oh my God, this is so amazing. And in fact, I actually have a tweet that I tweeted to one of my friends during that period where I said, if I lived in DC, this is the business that I would do. Because the only continent that wasn't represented in the food trucks was Africa. And I used to just think, oh my God, African food is so amazing. Why are all these amazing African restaurants here in Washington not actually like, doing this? And so, and that was in 2013. Came back to London after my year in DC. And after even though I knew, again, I still didn't want to do social work, I went back into social work because I needed to make money. And then finished, resigned from work, had a year of self-reflection. And then in the summer of 2015, whilst I was planning to start a fashion business, I then used to go out a lot, used to go to a lot of festivals, a lot of street food markets. And again, I was always like, either there wasn't like, a Nigerian food store, or if I did find one, it would be like, oh yeah, you have to wait 30 minutes for the food. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Growing up in Nigeria, street food is such a big part of our culture. And the most you would wait for street food in Nigeria is about 10 minutes. So I went to a festival in the summer of 2015 to see Femi Kuti perform. And whilst I was waiting for Femi's performance to start, I was in the queue waiting to get some jerk chicken. The ironic part of my story is I was actually at the front of the queue and I'd actually already gotten my meal, but I was waiting for my friend's meal. And then, eventually they were like, oh, the jerk is not ready. It's going to be another 15 minutes. 15 minutes basically turned to about an hour and a half. And I thought that same evening I went home and I thought, this is ridiculous. The idea of starting a street food at that business at that point had been in my mind for about a year and a half. So I went home and I Googled how to start a street food business. And before I knew it, 5 weeks later, I myself was now trading at the Africa Utopia Festival at South Bank. And at the time, I really didn't think it was a big deal. It's only later on when I started sharing that story with other people, and people were like, oh my God, how did you do that? And I realized that I had about 10 years experience of selling. My mom, I used to do cardboard markets with my mom, buying and selling the old time, traveling to America by myself. So, and also, as a social worker and as a psychologist, I was very good at talking to people, and also really kind of good at being able to kind of like see who could be a potential customer or potential client. So I guess all of those skills and all of those experiences kind of came together to help me with launching my business. And that's how Tokunbo's Kitchen started in September 2014. Fast forward 3 years later, I was like, okay, do you know what? This has definitely been my longest job. In fact, if you were to see my CV, I think the longest I've ever had a job for before I started Tokunbo's Kitchen was probably a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I am the kind of person, because I have so many different areas of interest, and I have so many different things that I want to do with my life. And again, it was reading Maya Angelou's memoirs and autobiographical series in my early 20s that kind of really gave me that permission to, like, you don't just have to be one thing. You don't just have to be a social worker. You can be a social worker and be a chef and be whatever you want to be. And so for me, I always knew that I didn't just want to be restricted to just this one thing. Reading Maya Angelou's autobiographical series really gave me the permission to seek to be more than just one thing. But yeah, as I was saying, I was intending on starting a fashion business, and next thing I knew, I started this food business. I was trading 5 weeks later. And the reason I was able to do that was because I had so many other experiences of actually, I had what I guess you could say is business acumen. So I knew about marketing, I knew about, pricing, I knew about market research. And even though at the time I didn't know that the terminology for the things that I knew, but I knew about all those things because I had essentially lived there, that business life since I was 15, for about 15 years, even 20 years of my life at the point when I started my food business. And so 4 years later, 3 years into the Tokunbo's Kitchen journey, I wanted to explore the other aspects of me. I am what you could say a multi-passionate serial entrepreneur. I felt that I'd built a really great brand with Tokunbo's Kitchen, but I knew that it was no longer bringing me joy. And one of the decisions that I made at the beginning of the year was joy was my word. And joy, everything I did had to be revolved around joy, whether it was bringing me joy or there was just has to be joy, something joyful about it. So at the point when I realized that running the food business, and also, let's be real, I started a business because I wanted the freedom and I wanted the flexibility, but I also wanted to make money. And whilst I was making money, I felt like I was barely surviving sometimes, and I really wasn't thriving. So I knew a lot of that was the business model that I was doing, because I started off doing street food, then I went into doing supper clubs and pop-ups, and then eventually slowly started moving into doing catering. By the time a year ago, I just felt like I wasn't fulfilling my potential enough. And also I wanted to explore my love of fashion and see if this is something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to restrict myself in that sense, because as my mentor once said to me, I felt like, you're like, what she had said to me was, you are like an onion. There's so many layers to you that's yet to be unpeeled. And that is something that I really kind of like resonates with me. So I decided that I wanted to like peel further into this layer, into the fashion thing, and really explore other possibilities and see if, a fashion business is something that I still want to do, and it's still a passion of mine. So I signed up for a fashion design course in September. So when I was speaking to my friend, him, the branding strategist, and I wanted her to help me rebrand and really kind of like bring together the different areas of the things that make that make me Tokunbo, and really see which way to go forward. And she was asking me about the fashion aspect, and we talked a little bit about what I was intending on doing, and realized that going forward, I wanted to be of service to people through my experiences, and really kind of like focusing on food, fashion, and fostering. But I guess fostering is more a personal goal than it is a collective thing. But yeah. Anyways, moving on. One of the things that I really hope to be able to offer through the podcast and the show is to be of service to other people. And I really, I truly believe in the power of storytelling. I know that I have listened to other podcasts. In fact, in the last year, I feel like I listen to podcasts more than I listen to music or even listen to anything else. And just from the podcast that I've listened to, I have received immense value through listening to other people's stories of how the struggles that they've had as entrepreneurs, or just some of the action steps that they've taken, or also just learning new ways or new business models for myself. So one of the things that I really want to be able to offer you through this podcast is motivation and inspiration, to be able to kind of take steps towards achieving your own goal. I know I'm very much about, in all my life, it's always been about community. In fact, one of my favorite hashtags that I use in pretty much anything I post online is Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu is a philosophy from South Africa, which essentially means I am because you are. And really for me, it's all about, doing things that impacts the collective. So not just doing for myself, but really thinking about how I can be of value to other people, how I can be of value to you. So if you are enjoying the show, or you have ideas of different contents that you would like to see, or the kind of guests you want us to feature, please do let me know. I know that I am going to be inviting some of my friends that I've made in the last 4 years, other entrepreneurs who really inspire me. But I also want to share other people's stories, individuals who are not necessarily entrepreneurs, but who have amazing, inspiring stories of how they've been able to reinvent themselves in some of the difficult choices that they've had to make, and how even though at the time it felt like it was the end of the world, or there didn't seem to be a way out of it, they were still able to kind of like reinvent themselves and create a new life for themselves. I also will be sharing some personal stories of myself, things like my divorce, and what that meant for me. And I've also been homeless. When I actually started my business in 2014, myself and my daughter were living in a 1-bed hostel at the time. But I am such a big believer of start where you are with what you have. And so even though at the time we were homeless and I didn't have my own place, I didn't allow that to stop me from pursuing the goals and the dream of what I wanted to create for myself. And also because I know that I can. A lot of times people that know me, or people after meeting me for a short period of time, they always talk about how fearless I am and how strong I am. I actually think I'm just very resilient. And I think I built that resilience up from a young age. And I feel like resilience is it's a skill that so many people can learn. It's not something that, it's just inherent in us. I think it's something that over time, with life experiences and things that happen, you kind of like, if you are able to kind of like self-reflect. And also books. Let me tell you guys, so books have been a big part of my life from when I was young. Like I said, growing up, I was that kid who went to the library, took out 12 books, read them all within a week, 2 weeks, and was back in the library for the next 12. And so for me, even now, I read so many books, and I don't just read books for self-development. I read fiction books, because there's nothing better than just curling up in a fiction and reading a story that's just so different to your life, but again, maybe possibly seeing a different reality or maybe getting inspired. But I also read a lot of business books, and I read a lot of books about personal self-development. And as part of this show, I am going to be talking about some of my favorite books that I read, because one of the things that I'm intending to do is also, as part of the show, start some kind of like book club, or maybe just at the end of every show, or when I'm interviewing the guest, just kind of asking people to share some of books that have kind of shaped their way of thinking and shaped their lives. Currently, I am reading this book called Everything is Figure Outable by Marie Folio. Now, I actually came across Marie Folio on the Oprah's Super Soul Sunday podcast, and I'm actually gonna I'll add a link to the show notes. It is such a great episode. That podcast, I've listened to it like maybe 3-5 times, and every single time I am just so in awe of, number one, how she tells a very, very captivating story, and how she kind of takes you along that journey of that story in a very comical way. But at the end of that story, there's a lesson for to be learned, and the lesson that she shares and the philosophy that she shares, which she says she got from her mom, is that everything is figure outable. No matter what it is that you're trying to do in this life, no matter what it is that you're trying to achieve, there is a way to figure it out. And essentially that is what this podcast is trying to be about. It's true shared storytelling. You really helping people to figure out how to do the things that they want to do, and how to create the life that you want to create for yourself. Another book that I read recently that I also really, really love, and again, just kind of like really helped me to kind of like take certain decisions in terms of, starting this vlog and starting this podcast, starting this show, really trying to create content and really trying to be of value to you, is Crushing It by Gary Vee. Crushing It, how great entrepreneurs build their business and influence, and how you can too. I'm the kind of person that when I'm reading a book and I see things in there that make sense to me, I literally will highlight it. I make notes, and I go back to the book, and I fold certain pages that really I'm like, yes, this is key. This is something I need to come back to. This is a really, really, great, powerful, inspiring book. Definitely would highly recommend it. Not just for entrepreneurs, anybody that's really thinking about building a personal brand, but also really just thinking about how you can, crush it in whatever you're trying to do in your life, whether it's business, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your personal life. Definitely highly recommend getting Crushing It by Gary Vee. Then the third book that I am going to recommend in today's show is The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. And I actually got this book as a Audible. I'm the kind of person that I love reading books in all different formats. I know there's some traditionalists that are like, oh my God, I need to hold a book and read it. Yes, I love that, but I also love listening to books. I love listening to fiction books. I love listening to non-fiction books. I love reading books on Kindle. I have the Kindle app, and I have a lot of books on Kindle that I love to read. In fact, some of my books that I have as paperback, I actually wish I could have them on Kindle, because those books I don't want to like highlight or like make notes in them, and having that on Kindle would just allow me to do that. The Power of Moments. I got this book initially on Audible, and what this book is about is really how we can create powerful moments intentionally. It's just really a great book. So I definitely highly recommend. Like I was saying, I read it on Audible, and I loved it so much that I actually got a paperback version as well. So I have like this book in 2 formats. Another book that I've read multiple times, and I literally have in all different formats. I have a paperback, I have the Audible, and I have a Kindle version, is The Alchemist. Paulo Coelho is one of the most gifted writers of our generation. I think he's so incredible. The way he writes this really, really powerful stories. And within that story, there's actually a message that resonates with millions of people. But every single time I read that book or listen to the story, I get a new something I didn't get the first time. And so for me, The Alchemist is really about, chasing your dreams and going after what might seem impossible or what might seem implausible. But if you have faith and you believe, if you have a vision, the universe will conspire to like help you achieve that. And I feel like I am a living testament to that. Earlier this year, I set the intention of creating the first London African Food Week. And at the time, I really did not know how I was going to create that. That was going to happen, but I knew that it's something that I'd been thinking about for a few years. And so I started working, reaching out to my network and the people within my community to see how I can make this goal of mine, how I could achieve this goal and this dream. And interestingly for me, a lot of people that I thought would be the ones that would be like really wanting to come on board with me, for whatever reason, just chose not to. But the universe had my back, and through just networking, connecting with people who had, similar values and similar vision and similar goals, I was able to go get a team of 12 people to make the first London African Food Week a success. And that was just such an incredible experience for me. Also, even this podcast, I've been thinking about, starting a podcast for over a year. Went to a podcast festival, listened to, people who, I listen to a lot of podcasts, kind of like as market research, as well as just really enjoy listening to podcasts and really thinking about the kind of show I want to create. I definitely know that I wanted to create a show that wasn't just about me bringing on other experts to tell their stories, really also kind of like using this platform as a way to kind of share my stories and my expertise to be of value to you. And so at the time, over a year ago, when I made the intention of starting a podcast, I really didn't have a clue how that was going to happen. But once again, just trusting my vision and just, working towards that goal, the universe conspired and helped send me the people that I needed, that I'm now not only able to kind of like launch a podcast, but actually also have a vlog, being able to create other content around, the things that I love, food as well as fashion. So, this is just the pilot episode of this show. But I have so many things that I have planned that I really want to kind of like showcase over the next couple of months, over the year. But essentially for me, this show is about connecting with you to share your story, to share my story, and to share other people's stories. So if this resonates with you, if this podcast sounds like something that you want to get into, please drop me a message. Would really love to hear from you about what you think of the show, what you think of the guest, and maybe you have ideas of episodes that we might want to cover, or if you have any books that you have been inspired by, or books that you really think, has really changed the way you think and approached life and your business, please make sure you share that with me. Like I said, I'm going to be curating a list of books, which hopefully will be inspiring other people, and maybe starting a pod club where we can again talk about specific books and what each book means to individuals. Okay. Well, I guess I just wanted to say thank you for listening to the pilot episode of Tokunbo Chronicles. Like I said, this is really about a show where it's about storytelling. It's about the shared experience of stories and how we can make meaningful connections, whether it's personal or business connections, and where we can get inspired and you can get inspired and motivated. So thank you for listening. And really, for me, this show is about being of value to you. So if there's a way or any ideas that you have of what you think would you want to listen to, or you want to hear, or the type of guest you want to listen to, we're going to be focusing on a lot of different things and talking about, all things business related. So not just talking about mindset or motivation, but really thinking about what makes a business successful. What are the steps that you need to take to become an entrepreneur? But also talking about mental health, talking about, choices that I've made. So I kind of touched briefly about my homelessness journey. That is going to be an episode in itself where I'm going to be talking about the things that led to me becoming homeless, and how that impacted on me, and actually impacted on my mental health for a very long time. And even though I had a lot of experiences as a social worker and as a psychologist, it was still a very, very tough emotional time for me. And the things that I did to kind of like get myself out of that moment, and why, now I've been, able to come out on the other side of it smiling. So thanks once again for listening. I'm so, so excited to finally be in the position of launching Tokunbo's Chronicle. I really hope you're going to stay with me on this journey, and I'm so very much looking forward to hearing from you all. Thank you.